All right. All right. So thanks to everyone for registering for this webinar today. So you would be sent a copy of the recording. You're getting this webinar recorded. So you would be receiving a link to the recording via email. So in case you missed to attend this webinar in person this morning, you don't have to worry. You would always have access to these recordings, as long as you've registered though. All right. So I'm going to be your host for today. My name is Sreeram, and I'm part of the accounts management and solutions team at Doc. Just to give you a brief overview about Doc first before we move to the agenda today. So Doc 365 is a software company based in Jacksonville, Florida. So we've been in the business of developing custom business applications leveraging Microsoft technologies, primarily SharePoint and Power Platform. We've been in the business for the last 2 decades and have been working with over 300 organizations, helping them with their custom business needs. All right, so the agenda that we had for today was to discuss about how organizations could build contract processes that people actually follow. So we're going to touch upon why contract processes at businesses break and how you can leverage Microsoft 365 tools that you already have invested in and then could make use of it to streamline your contract processes. We're also going to touch upon actionable next steps that could help you modernize your processes. And we're also going to show you a very high level demo of how you could use the Microsoft 365 tools or SharePoint to go about with your contract management requirements. All right. So why do contract processes break or fail? So it's not about the tools that you have in place. It's more about the misalignment between the people and the processes. So teams, as in, I mean, you folks across different departments that are part of the contract process, or at least needs to touch a contract. They follow different processes and manage contracts in silos. And this is also primarily due to the lack of shared visibility or accessibility that leads to, more confusion or missed deadlines when it comes to managing these contracts. And then, with the manual workarounds, it kind of tends to, slow things down and introduce risks. And then, processes aren't built for how people actually work. All right, so to take a closer look at each of these individually, so let's speak about low contract visibility. All right, so think about your current existing contracts and where they are stored. Just ask yourself this question, as to where your contracts are lying around. Are they on your personal folders? Are they lying around in your email inboxes, or are they being stored in shared folders that only a few can access? Now, let's take up, vendor contract, for instance. I'm sure, every organization deals with vendor contracts. So before a contract is even executed, it's highly likely that, somebody from procurement has access to it, an immediate supervisor maybe, and maybe, some cross-functional approvers that need to, vet and approve these contracts. They may have access. Once it's signed, either physically or through, one of those e-signature tools such as DocuSign or Adobe Sign, then it's only the signing authority, the procurement personnel that was looped in the process, that may have a copy of the fully executed agreement. Now, the vendor then starts the delivery of the promised good or service. So the question to ask is, does the department for who the delivery was made have access to this contract? The personnel that needs to ensure any obligations or deliverables or compliances are adhered to, do they have access to it? Does finance have access to, ensure payments are vetted and paid in time? Now, the person that actually needs to review these contracts, it's highly likely that they never had access in the first place, because they're the ones that need to review these contracts before they are up for the next renewal or before the contract expires and decide whether the contract needs to be renewed or terminated. The question to ask, do they have access? So the first step is to clearly chalk out as to who really needs access and who needs to be accountable for these contracts and to what extent as it evolves through different stages of its life cycle. One of the easiest ways to ensure that your contracts accessibility and visibility exists is to really have these contracts uploaded onto a central repository or a folder. You could use SharePoint if your organization is already on the Microsoft suite. Now, SharePoint, as you all know, is a highly secure, centralized document management tool that can, allow for secured storage of important documents such as your contracts. And your Microsoft 365 subscription, comes with a standard 1 terabyte storage that you can leverage, so you don't have to, invest additionally in any third-party storage solutions. And if you are to use SharePoint for your document or your contracts repository, it also allows for granular levels of permissions, so you can really control who has access to these documents or contracts and what levels of access do they have. Now, we've already done a separate webinar on how to create a SharePoint document library, how to store all of your, maybe start with the executed contracts and also create trackers for, your key contract terms or deadlines for renewals and cancellations. Speaking about the manual workarounds, a contract process could have different stages, right? So the contract process typically starts with, one of your colleagues requesting for a contract to be created or reviewed. Now, this either gets sent to their immediate supervisor or to a contracts administrator or to the legal team, depending on, how the process is at your organization. And these requests could come by either in the form of an email or a Teams chat or maybe a simple phone call, requesting for a contract to be created or vetted. Now, these requests could easily slip through the cracks if they aren't, sent to a specific email that's identified for this purpose, or if someone is not always monitoring these email boxes for such requests, these mishaps are bound to happen. Now, as multiple requests come in from different folks, there's also a chance of certain requests being deprioritized based on, the kind of requests they are, or there's been instances, when the contracts administrator, could choose to prioritize on a $100,000 sales contract over a vendor contract or something more basic like a confidentiality agreement or an amendment to an existing contract. So obviously the contract administrator cannot be blamed for doing so because however, these requests should be tracked or reassigned or prioritized based on the contract types or when these contracts are expected by the requester, or simply based on when these contracts need to be effected by. Now, requests that are left to sit, could end up getting lost eventually, and then contracts getting delayed. Now, slower contract turnaround gives the other party, especially if you're working with a client on a sales contract, it gives them the time to reconsider things which you never want. And this turnaround could also mean the difference between it turning into a deal in the current quarter or simply slipping over into the next one. So manual processes, right from contract requests could hurt your cash flow. And instead of having these requests directed through emails or Teams chat or phone calls, you could also have request forms created. So you could make use of tools such as Microsoft Forms, where you could set up, specific forms for specific kind of contracts based on, the type of information that you would want captured from the requester in order for the contract preparer to go about creating those contracts. And you also have your Microsoft 365 subscription. So, based on the kind of subscriptions you have, there's a high possibility that you also have access to free versions of, the Power Platform. So you have access to tools such as Power Apps, where you could start creating, basic applications that could be your portal to invite, your colleagues to, send in their contract requests. Now, in certain processes, they aren't built for how people actually work, right? I mean, we've seen instances where clients reach out to us who are looking for a centralized or a unified contracts platform, who have been using different tools for different processes and at different stages of the contracts lifecycle. So they could be using a completely different solution to manage the requests. And then there's somebody who's tracking these requests, and then manually have to send these requests or assign it to the right folks within the contracts team, who would then capture that information, choose to go ahead and create a contract out of. Now this contract, once created, is sent back over an email, and then this needs further internal approval. Again, approvals could happen over emails, which kind of add uh, to the vulnerabilities that these contracts could face as it evolves through different stages. So the trick is to kind of start small. You don't want, I mean, I wouldn't say you wouldn't want, but there could be a chance that users, if you go ahead and implement comprehensive tools for your contracts lifecycle management, it could overwhelm users, because it's basic human instinct to resist change, and people could take ages to familiarize themselves with these systems and use it to its full potential. So, the trick is to start small. Maybe you could start with managing and centralizing all of your executed contracts, have them stored centrally on a SharePoint site, maybe invite all the relevant folks that would ideally need access to this contract in some form or the other, bring them, give them access to the site, give them access to the contract documents. And you could also create, I mean, you do not have to maintain separate spreadsheets to, keep track of your contract expiries or renewals or the deadlines. You could also set up, trackers within the SharePoint site that would kind of, you could also set up alerts and reminders, for you to be notified whenever a contract is due for expiry or renewal. Now, we've kind of gone over all of these in our previous webinar. So, we would be happy to share with you the links to the previous ones. So, if you wanted to start centralizing your fully executed contracts and then take baby steps, that's going to serve as a guide for you to start small. Now, a team first contract management system. Now, we spoke about how you could, leverage SharePoint for your contract management needs, be your centralized repository, manage access and permissions to these contracts for different users across different departments within the organization, and also, be alerted or reminded of, key contract deadlines. So what I would say is your ideal system already exists. I mean, if you are already in Microsoft, so you have access to SharePoint, which could be a centralized storage, and then you have access to the other Office tools such as your Teams, Word, and so on for your real-time collaboration. So if people wanted to collaborate on these contracts right from its creation all the way till it's finally approved and signed, so you could make use of these tools. So you already have an ideal contracts management system. It's just about, how where you start and how you progress through each step to kind of, bring in your entire process within the system. And now what this would also mean is that since this is on SharePoint and it's part of your Microsoft 365 tenant, so you have complete control and access over all of your data. I mean, any document that you've uploaded within SharePoint, it's all inside of your SharePoint document libraries. So you're not storing or sharing any documents externally on third-party cloud based solutions, storage solutions, and the integrations with the other Microsoft tools. It kind of ensures that there is better user adoption and a reduced learning curve for the users because they get to use tools that they're already familiar with. And then as for your securities, since this is inside of SharePoint and your Microsoft environment, so any security or compliance policies that you may have already set for your Microsoft resources, it applies to all of these documents too. And since you've already invested in Microsoft 365, on all of your users have their end user licenses. So it's kind of easy to, bring in users across the organization, give them access to these documents within SharePoint. So, I mean, you're not paying anything additional for additional users to be brought in. So it's making better use of your existing Microsoft investments. Now, we have created or implemented contract management solutions that are built on SharePoint. I would want to show you a glimpse of what we've done using SharePoint, how we've managed to create a unified platform that could take care of all the different processes that you have within your contract process, bring them onto one single platform. Right. So as you can see, we're still within SharePoint. So we've kind of brought the centralized repository within SharePoint. So this is what it would look like. So if you were to, go ahead and bring in all of your contracts, all of your active contracts within the organization onto Doc, which ultimately, resides inside of SharePoint. So you have a centralized list view of all the different contracts that you have within the organization. Again, depending on, who's logged in, it kind of shows them only those contracts that maybe an administrator would have chosen to give them access to. Now, let's say if somebody from sales needs to have access to only the sales contracts, or somebody from procurement only needs access to the vendor contracts. So when they log in, they would only see those contracts that they've been permission to access. And it's easy for them to, to look through contracts. They can easily search for a contract using the contract name, or even a partial name if they have it handy, or based on contract numbers. Or if they want to get to a specific document based on a keyword search, they can also use the document search functionality. So the platform kind of OCRs through all the documents that are uploaded onto the platform. So it's easily searchable, and depending on how broader or granular the user wants the search to be, they can also make use of these filter capabilities to get to the information that they're looking for. This shows them, what contract is with what organization, what status are these contracts, and what is the effective date, when are these contracts set to expire, and so on. So all of that could be captured in this centralized list view. Now, if you wanted to, go about giving permissions to different folks from different departments to these contracts, you could easily, manage those permissions too. So you could maybe, look for specific contracts that meet a certain criteria based on which you want to, assign permissions to different users, and then, simply choose those contracts and then give them permissions in bulk. So here you can I mean, it integrates with your Microsoft Active Directory. So anybody within your organization has got a valid Microsoft account. So you would easily be able to, search for those users and then, add them under different permission levels. And you could also leverage any SharePoint groups that your organization may have already created. So you can bring in multiple folks than simply adding them as individual users. And you can grant them the levels of permissions here. So you can choose what user should have only read-only access or what user should have edit permissions to these contracts. Now, I did speak about, request forms that you could use in order to do away with your email or your Teams requests that come in from different folks. So here you could centralize your request intake. So if somebody wanted to, go ahead and request for a contract, so you could set up different templates based on different request types. So you could have a template or a form for your NDA request, or you could have a different form for your consulting services agreement. And the user would simply have to, punch in some of that information that the contract preparer would ideally need to have in order for them to, go ahead and create a contract out of. And these forms are completely customizable. So we've got, form builder capabilities that you can leverage for your contract requests. So under the settings tab, you can easily manage the different requests, add new, request templates, make any changes to the existing ones. So here's where you can, go ahead and view the different fields that you have within those forms, be able to, add additional fields, remove any existing ones, or even create new fields through the platform. Now, once a user, fills up the form, it could be assigned to a relevant user that ideally needs to, receive these requests. And whenever a user creates a request form for a contract, the assignee or the person that these requests are assigned to, they would receive notifications, and and the notifications would carry a hyperlink, which when clicked would take them right to where this action item is. So they could now log into the request and see all the requests that they've been assigned to. So just have to go ahead and click on that request and decide if they have all the information, then choose whether to go ahead and create a contract out of or simply reject that request. Even for your contracts, you could give your users the ability to self-service their contract needs. So you could have your standardized templates set up in the form of contract templates. So let's say if you have a standard document for your NDAs, for your service agreements, for your subcontractor agreements, for your vendor agreements. So you could bring all of those, you could bring all of those standardized documents, create them up as templates. So, whenever a user wants to create a contract, they could easily leverage those templatized documents. Now, they could just fill up a form with any information that needs to go inside of that contract document, the templatized one. And then, these fields could either be information that needs to go inside of the contract, or could simply be, contract metadata that you would wish to track once the contract is created. Now, you can either choose to create a contract using one of your templates, or if you've received a third-party contract, let's say if you've received a contract that's already been prepared by your vendor, and you only have to review and vet that contract, so you could choose to upload it as a document. So either ways, you can continue to track any metadata that you may want for that contract, such as your effective dates, your expiry dates, who's it signed with, any key contract terms, and so on, and then go ahead and create that contract. And once that contract is created, it's available within the centralized repository. So, users do not have to go ahead and manually upload the contract document, or download the contract document, make changes to it, upload it back up. No, that's not the case. So when you create a contract within Doc, it goes inside of your SharePoint repository. Now, if you were to select a specific contract record from the repository, and you click on that contract, you can see the documents under the Documents tab. So there are certain default folder structures that come along with Doc. And just to show you how this is all still based off of SharePoint, so you could select this document, open the contract document library. which would show you where this document resides within SharePoint. Now, users still get to work with Microsoft Word. The platform is integrated with Microsoft Word because all of this is inside of Microsoft 365. They can still leverage the standard functionalities of Microsoft Word that they're already familiar with. If they want to go about making any changes, any revisions, any red lines, any comments, they can still do that. They have access to all of the standard functionalities of Word. And it also continues to keep track of the version history. So as and when a user goes to the document, makes a change, creates a minor version, and these versions are easily trackable through the version histories. Now, if a user wants to view or restore it to the previous version, they can do that. But at any point in time, to avoid any confusions between multiple versions, you would only see one document in here, which is the most recently updated one. And then we also have workflow capabilities. So workflows within SharePoint, I mean, there are certain standard workflow templates that you can leverage. But then for a business user with little to no IT experience could be a bit challenging without the assistance from an IT resource. So we've kind of simplified the workflow templates within Doc. So it's more easier for users to go about creating new workflow templates and sending these contracts through the internal approval processes. You can pre-configure workflows to a certain contract type. So whenever a contract of a certain type is created, the platform could automatically trigger a certain workflow. Or you could also give the users the ability to, add or choose between other workflows depending on, the location that the contract is being created from, or a dollar amount, or a type of contract. And you can also get the platform to recommend the right template so the users can be sure that they're using the right workflow. And workflows are also very seamless. So, you could have different stages in a workflow. Each stage could have a reviewer or an approver, or you could have multiple reviewers and approvers too. And it's a sequential workflow. So it's the first stage that gets triggered first. The approvers receive a notification. They can be led back into the platform through the hyperlinks within the notification. They could come back in here, look at any notes that the users may have left for them, go to the document. If they want to go about making any changes to the actual document, they can always do so through the Documents tab. And then, if it's good to go, they can come back and, provide their approvals or simply seek more information before they go about, approving that contract or the stage of that workflow. And it's a sequential one, so it's one stage after the other. So the process is similar. Now, the other reviewers and approvers within the next stage would be notified. They can go about with the approval activity similarly. Now, once all these stages are complete, the user would be notified that the workflows are complete, which could mean that the contract could now be shared externally for negotiations. And then you also have the history, which kind of tracks the different stages that the contract has evolved through. So you have complete audit log as to, who worked on the contract, who created the contract, who initiated the workflows, who approved the workflows, who sent it externally, who signed the contract. So all of that could be tracked in the history for your compliance or your audit needs too. And you can also send the contracts for signature through DocuSign or Adobe Sign. So we've integrated DocuSign, Adobe Sign, and Certify into the platform. So you do not have to, log out of the contracts system, download a copy of the contract, and then, upload it back into DocuSign, send it as an envelope, and then, track as the contract is being fully executed. So the integrations would mean that you could now send the contract documents for signature through the platform itself. So you could create those envelopes here, choose who your signers are going to be, have multiple signer levels, and then upload the documents to sign. Now, once the documents are uploaded through the DocuSign integrations here, DocuSign would take over. It would send out notifications to different users. And then once all of the signers have signed, it would send back a copy of the fully executed agreement back into Doc. So, the user wouldn't have to kind of wait for that notification to arrive from DocuSign. The platform takes care of it all. So yeah, so the intent was to show you how you could use SharePoint for your basic contracts tracking and repository or storage needs. But as your needs evolve, let's say if you want to have more complex workflows, we've kind of walked that route already, and we've streamlined the way you could set up these complex workflows and processes within your contracts lifecycle management into SharePoint. Now, if you are interested in seeing a personalized demo based on your organization's processes, I would suggest that you head to our website. It's www.mydoc365.com, and you could always book a personalized demo, and one of our consultants would be able to help you with it. I see we are slightly over our scheduled time. I mean, if there are any questions, you could always post it within the chat window, or we can go ahead and send you a copy of today's recording. And in response, maybe you could send in your questions, and we'll be sure to send you our responses to those questions personally. All right. So I thank you for your time today. Stay tuned. We have more webinars coming up on the series, which is primarily leveraging SharePoint for your contract needs. And I will look forward to meeting you again in the future sessions. So thank you so much again. Have a great day ahead. Bye.